For many bowling ball experts, the idea that urethane balls could even get softer with time seems counterintuitive. When a new ball is manufactured, it continues to cure over time, and chemical bonds make new connections throughout the material as molecules move and shift. Unused bowling balls newly off the manufacturing line initially tend to get harder as part of this curing process. USBC has monitored this phenomenon and agrees that this is the case. However, what occurs with use of a urethane ball is a different story. Used equipment has always shown the opposite in that urethane balls get significantly softer with use. USBC research has highlighted three key aspects that appear to be the root cause of the softening, which are friction causing shear forces within the cover stock, oil on the cover stock that can degrade the urethane at impact measurements, and altering the surface of the cover stock with a chemical solvent. Shear forces are forces applied to a body which result in shear strain. These forces during bowling can come from several potential sources, including the friction between the ball and the lane, the carpet belt taking the ball out of the pit over to the ball door, the belts sending the ball back up the ball track to the ball return, and the wheels lifting the ball to the top of the ball return. Due to the differing chemical compositions of different types of bowling balls, these forces can impact hardness in different ways.
A urethane's going to be better at springing back to where it was, but you got to think when you stretch something over and over again, what happens to it? Ultimately, it weakens. You keep stretching an elastic band, sooner or later it's not going to come all the way back.
To research this concept, USBC designed two tests where hardness was measured before and after on two different urethane and two different reactive bowling balls. The first test was to apply friction to the cover stock using a coefficient of friction measurement system used in the standard USBC bowling ball approval process. The second test was to apply friction to the cover stock by recreating how a ball interacts with the lane equipment. Hardness was tested in the spot where the ball contacted the lane panel, both before and after subjecting the balls to a specified number of sled pulls. The results showed that the urethane balls changed an average of 5.7 and 2.7 points of hardness, while the reactive balls experienced an average change of 2.1 and 2.2 points of hardness, respectively. The next test involved simulating the friction created by the ball lift mechanism in the ball return. The four balls were placed on a ball spinner, and as the balls spun, a ball return wheel was held against them for 20 seconds. The largest differences in hardness were observed immediately after the shear forces were applied. After allowing 15 minutes for the balls to cool, the hardness changes decreased. After 2 hours, the balls completely cooled off and lowered hardness values were still observed. 2 days later, testing showed the same results, illustrating that these samples had been permanently damaged. Additionally, the data also shows the urethane samples changing in hardness more than the reactive samples. The balls were then sanded to a fresh 500 grit Abralon surface, following USBC's standard operating procedure for bowling ball approvals. After sanding, the urethane balls returned to within 1 point of their original baseline hardness, measured before any testing, which indicates that the damage is isolated to the outermost layers of the bowling balls. However, the balls were not able to be fully restored to the original hardness of the samples, which suggests that sanding the balls is yet another example of applying shear forces to the surface. The impact of oil on measuring bowling ball hardness was also tested, as it was determined at the onset of USBC's hardness studies in 2019 that testing through lubrication can allow the durometer to penetrate deeper, resulting in softer readings. The durometer manufacturer also confirmed that testing through lubrication is outside of the scope of how durometers should be used. For this test, 14 balls were checked for hardness under 5 different conditions, which included a baseline prior to applying oil, testing immediately through the oil, wiping the oil off with a dry towel and retesting, testing through oil that has been applied to the ball for 2 hours, and wiping the oil off with a dry towel and retesting. The The results showed that the balls changed in hardness anywhere from nearly 2 points to as much as 3.6 points when tested through oil. The hardest values came from testing before any oil was applied, and the softest values came from when oil was on the covers for the longest amount of time. Cleaning the balls with a dry towel was ineffective at removing the effects of oil from the test. The test was also conducted on 8 reactive ball samples, with the step of wiping off the balls with a dry towel omitted, since all the samples absorbed the oil well within the 2 hours after the oil was applied. The results here showed that testing through oil has no measurable effect on reactive balls. This is also why an isopropyl alcohol cleaning process was incorporated into all field tests conducted in 2020 and beyond. Taking all of this into consideration, the premise that urethane balls do not get softer and only measure softer due to lane oil is not consistent with the data from these tests.